Welcome, everyone, to the May LOPSA East Tennessee gathering this evening. May the 4th be with you. We are about to begin our meeting, but let me introduce myself first to you. If you don't already know me, my name is Ben Taylor. I am the one of the LOPSA co-organizer. And we have several co-organizers with us this evening. We have Andy Cowell. We also have Jonathan Evenden. And we have Aaron Hahn, who is also a representative of the LOPSA National Board. So before I begin, do we have any announcements? I'm looking for our participants here. Oh, yeah, Aaron is technically not representing LOPSA here tonight. I understand. Yes, but I'd like to let everybody know that he is on the board in the event that they have any kind of questions that they'd like to direct to him. So I am looking for hands up for any kind of announcements that may be forthcoming. Do not see any hands raised. But that having been said, what I'm going to do actually is, well, there's Andy Cowell. Andy Cowell, I'm going to give you the floor now. And I'm going to step away from the floor for the moment.
I'm just going to point out that Daniel posted a job posting in the general chat. HPC network engineer, if anybody's interested or knows somebody who's interested. Ben, you're on mute.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, sir. I think we have some door prizes this evening. I'm going to give the floor to Mr. McDaniel from Tech Systems. If you'd like, you can go ahead and introduce yourself. Let's see. I've given you the floor now, Mr. McDaniel. You can come forward.
Like we've got 3 individuals here, so everybody's going to be a winner. We've got 3 gift cards, so we really do appreciate you guys showing up and supporting LOPSA, and definitely just want to extend myself to anybody that may be interested in just learn a little bit more about tech systems or know someone who might be in the position that needs our service. So tonight, and I'll get that information to get those gift cards out to you guys.
And a very special thank you to Tech Systems for those 3. You know who those 3 people are, right?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, excellent. Gotcha. Very good. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
All right.
Before we begin.
I think you just need to turn off your mic and turn off your cam. So now that having been said, we have passed announcements and we have passed the door prize phase. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jonathan Evenden, who has graciously given up some of his time to discuss how to catch thieves, which is something that we're all should be interested in if we're not explicitly interested in that. So I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to Mr. Jonathan Evenden. Everybody, give him a round of applause in the most suitable method that you are aware of. And Jonathan, thank you for taking your time out tonight, and take it away from here.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. I mean, you know, you're asking me to, it's an opportunity to get up here and talk in front of people. I mean, I'm going to take that chance anytime I can. All right. So I was trying to figure out how to do this talk without having it be like super clickbaity. So we are going to talk about some, I basically picked out 2 very well executed attempts to steal money from two of my clients. And we're going to go into detail as to how it occurred, why they didn't get the money, and what the clients could have done from a security standpoint. One of them is an active criminal investigation. So we've got some evidence on the person that's involved to put him away for quite some time. But the big one is the one that is still being investigated. So anyway, let me share this. All right, so I'm trying not to make this too clickbaity, but if you've been in IT for any amount of time, you've encountered spam emails or various attempts for people to take your money. So let's just this is not an introduction to financial scams because I'm going to teach you how to do it. Although there's certainly some merit into knowing how it occurs. Some of the more popular ones over the years have, I'm a prince, I'm in some war-torn country. In spite of the fact that I'm in some war-torn country, we have $40 million in USD. It's very, very important that they specify that in broken English and bad grammar. And it's locked in a bank account. And somehow the magical convenience fee that you pay will be able to free that money, and you will be extremely wealthy. Yeah, about that. Then some of the more effective recent ones, FedEx attempted to delivery. This is, of course, in an email. They delivered a package for you, but it didn't go through. We have a PDF or an HTML file that has information on this invoice that you didn't get. Please open this. Please ignore the virus warnings that your computer might go off. Disable your antivirus. Just open the file. No problem. You really need to see this information about this package that you didn't get. Or also, this is a classic one, especially if you're listing individual items on eBay or Craigslist or something. Hey, you've got this awesome $500 item. I want to buy it, but I'm going to send you more than the sales price, and you're going to have some extra money left over. Could you cash it and send it off to my buddy? And basically, it's a fraudulent check. And
hey, Jonathan.
So, yeah.
Hey, I think we're just seeing the your title page. Is that intended right now? And
I'm on slide 2.
Okay, yeah, we're not actually seeing the slides themselves. We're seeing the editor to the slides.
Hang on a second.
But not the act itself. So
let me try this again because I clicked on share that window. Let me do this then. I'm gonna close these other items. Let's see if I can just share. And if I do share entire screen, yeah, let's just share entire screen. And then we go into recursive mode. There we go. All right, are you able to see that now?
Yeah, that's
better. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which the introduction to financial scams is what it says.
Okay, so I was all the way down to yeah. So one of my friends decided to see how far the guy would send it, and he actually got a check in the mail that was tied to an actual person. I mean, obviously the check wasn't legit. What happens is the check will cash, but then the funds will roll back, and now you're out the money that you sent. So it's definitely a scam. And then finally, I'd like to talk to you, or not finally, I'd like to talk to you about your car's extended warranty. I'm sure at this point everyone's gotten that one, and we're from the password department. We need to check your password for passwordiness. Please enter it here. Okay, so real important. The real actual question is, how do these scams occur? And of course, I'm going to turn to the almighty wisdom of Dilbert. I have a new hobby. It's called phishing. I send fake banking emails to global executives. Then I find out their financial information and use it to steal money that they don't deserve. Dear customer, this is your bank. We forgot your social security number and password. Why don't you send it to us so that we can protect your money? Sincerely, IB Banker. Looks legit. It sounds silly, but there's a reason this is funny. And the reason this is funny is because it works and because these emails do work. And basically, in both of the case studies that I'm going to discuss tonight, there was a component to this, more so in the first one than in the second one, but yeah. So I'll be basically the whole point, or the focus of this talk will be I'm reviewing 2 instances of clients that encountered some financial fraud, be comparing and contrasting the incidences. I've changed all the names. they're all gender neutral. So, I'm going to do everything possible to not make it clear as to who I'm talking about if you happen to know who the facts are. I mean, obviously Ken and Nicholas will know because they work for me and they were party to all this. But beyond that, the point is the goal is to not expose who these people are, especially since one of them is an active criminal investigation. I've also changed the names of the companies to something that some of you might find more familiar. I was hoping Wesley was actually going to be on this tonight because he would find this these names especially good. And then if you don't recognize the company names, then you might not have had the pleasure of sifting through Microsoft KV articles. Okay, so the first company we're going to call Contoso. I'm hoping at least somebody here recognizes that. It's a fake Microsoft name that they use. They've got a couple dozen companies that they'll use that they know are not real company names. Okay, so Contoso, they're one of our clients. They're large enough that they have an accounting department. We provide their IT support, and they don't have any internal IT staff. It's a good sized operation. I'm actually sort of surprised that they don't have internal IT staff, but I'm certainly not going to complain because it's really to our benefit because they call us for a lot of stuff. So for the sake of naming, we will use the following. We've got Alex, who's the company owner. We've got Sam, who is the accounting worker responsible for paying invoices. So the setup. So Alex is a frequent email user. Alex likes to use email. Alex uses a lot of email. He sends a lot of email. He receives a lot of email. Alex is not necessarily a risk taker on the internet, but definitely did not have a strong email password. Contoso has Office 365. Contoso has had recommendations for setting up two-factor authentication, but has never decided to act on it. And we have our managed antivirus software, but they don't have content filtering. They have content filtering on a couple of the machines, but not on all of them, and certainly not on the boss's computer, because Alex did not want that on that computer. So right off the bat, there are some great opportunities for breaking and entering. It's amazing how something as simple as 2FA will thwart a large number of scams and break-ins that occur, because just even the inability to log into an email account, or even the fact that if you don't have a strong password, then 2FA can help bridge that gap in terms of security. All right, so the compromise. So one day, Alex mentions the main desktop is running slowly and acting weird. I mean, it happens on occasion. It's not like there were random pop-ups that were coming up. Just some general oddness and slowness from a machine that really had no business being slow. We run scans. There are some viruses, but nothing that appears hugely critical. It's not like he had ransomware. He, she, whoever it is, Alex. It's not like Alex had ransomware. It's not like anything super glaring that was bad. But our general precaution is anytime we clean off viruses, anytime we do stuff like that, anytime we find malware, we're going to typically recommend to end users that they need to change passwords. It's just a good precaution, especially after a number of cases like this and other situations where people have been bitten from having compromises and not changing passwords. And then I cannot prove that Alex uses passwords, but I would not be surprised at the time. I've learned since that was the case. So you can see you have a compromised machine. It's been cleaned. We recommended changing passwords. We don't have two-factor authentication, and we have password reuse. This is just a great opportunity for someone to get in and start causing problems. So the scam, it wasn't immediate, and I don't remember the exact amount of time, but it might have been a couple of weeks, might have been a month. There was a period of time that passed between when we cleaned off the machine and the actual scam that occurred. And this does make some sense, because the behavior that we've seen is that if an account gets compromised, you'll have the dumb ones, the dumb criminals that will go in and start immediately blasting emails, or immediately start sending emails, or immediately try to replicate. But the smarter ones will check to make sure the account is compromised, and then, do under the radar activities just to make sure that everything is readable and workable. If you immediately start going in and blasting, then someone's going to know that it's compromised. But if you go in and do a minimal amount of stuff, just enough to know that you do have access and that it is compromised, you're going to have a much longer time to exploit that compromise. So yeah, there was some time that passed. And then one day, Sam over in accounting receives an email invoice from Alex asking for payment by wire for an invoice of $22,000. Now, it just so happens that it wasn't for any items that are normally purchased. I mean, they've got multiple businesses flowing through this. They buy all sorts of weird and random things that I never heard about before I started doing work for them. And it wasn't for a vendor that they had ever used before. Now, I order from new vendors, not on a regular basis, but I do get new vendors to use, so there is a process to onboarding a vendor, and there's a process to buying things that you've never purchased before. But at a minimum, this should have raised a bit of a red flag. Sam replies back by email only, asking if this was accurate. And if you want to guess what the email reply was, of course the email reply was yes, because the email account was compromised. So the big issue is that yes, Sam recognizes that this something's off, but only sends an email reply. Big mistake. And because if that email account is compromised, then of course any replies are going to be whatever the scammer or cracker is trying to do. So Sam says, okay, great, and submits the invoice for payment by wire to the bank. Given the size of Contoso, $22,000 was not a huge amount. I mean, they upgraded their server closet, recently before that, and they spent more just on a simple upgrade. So it's not a huge amount of funds in terms of, they're going to go out of business because of a $22,000 wire. That's just not the case. It's a rounding error. I mean, I won't go into the details, but this is more annoyance rather than you're bankrupt and your credit is ruined because of this amount. However, thankfully, the bank was suspicious and decided to directly call Alex, not Sam, to confirm the transaction. And it was sitting ready to go as an outbound wire. Like they were ready to hit that button, and that money would have been released and would have been gone forever. Alex, of course, is hearing about the invoice for the first time. No surprise there. And tells them not to pay the invoice. And then he immediately calls us. That was supposed to be not a he. And my reaction on hearing all this, and I go straight to facepalm, because sometimes it's just, yeah. So why was my reaction to this? Because there's just a huge number of problems that led to the fact that money was sitting there ready for wire. So, and we'll go into, I'll cover that in a bit. So we review everything from the emails to logins and discover the following: that the password for Alex's email was never changed after the computer infection, because of course it wasn't. Who wants to go about the inconvenience of having to change all your passwords? Passwords were reused. So if a password had been compromised, even though Outlook stores the password in a safe way for Office 365, he's reusing his passwords. And so you can very easily pull your stored web passwords from Chrome and Firefox and Internet Explorer. I can do it with a free tool in about 30 seconds. Those contents are very easy to get to. And so it was just a matter of pulling all those passwords, and boom, you've now got access to Alex's email. The perpetrator had created rules that filtered all emails to and from Sam to a hidden folder in Outlook, so that Alex would never see the responses or the sent emails. And this is actually behavior that we've seen other times that emails have been compromised. This prevents the person who has been compromised from knowing that there's conversation on the matter, as well as the alert for rules, meaning Office 365 has the ability to send an alert if any rule anywhere has changed, and no one was notified about these rule changes. Those they had never been set up, they weren't turned on, nothing was active. And so this is just painful to see this. And once again, we had made recommendations to change a number of these factors prior to the compromise, but the problem that we keep encountering, and we'll talk about this more in depth because on the next one, is that the security that comes from some of these measures is trumped by how less convenient they are. So people prefer convenience to security even after they've been hacked, which I can't really help that. So what's the fallout? What changed as a result of almost losing $22,000? Contoso had us change all the email passwords for everyone in the organization, and people were told not to reuse their email passwords. Okay, that's an okay change. Alex came down hard on Sam and the rest of the accounting department, and that's it. Yep, that's it. That's the only thing that changed. And I had a whole conversation about two-factor authentication. I had a whole conversation about multiple other facets of that and how they got compromised. And that's all that changed. Okay, so my reaction. For one double face palm, because one just doesn't cut it. It's a situation where I can tell them that this is what they need to do, and this is how they can prevent this in the future, and it's just not happening. And by the way, the person that compromised it was over in Russia. So I mean, there was no way we're gonna be able to have any retaliation on the person who did that. So at least at a minimum, the passwords were changed, and we know that they're all individual passwords. So if someone had another password that was compromised, at least at a minimum, that's not going to affect that. The only other upside is that Alex was not an admin. And yes, some of the small businesses that we deal with, the owners like to be admins. Don't get me started. It just happens, depends on the size of the organization. And so at least the compromise did not extend beyond that mailbox, which I guess, it could have been even more destructive if that account had been an admin that was compromised. Okay, so some other thoughts. The breakdowns can be summarized in the following ways. No 2FA on an email. This is very easy with Office 365. Password reuse in spite of a virus cleanup, no password change. I mean, this is just, once again, we recommend, we don't force anybody to do anything, at least when it comes to this stuff. Sam only confirmed the invoice via a compromised email account. There was never any pick up the phone and call. Part of it is because of the volume of invoices that they get. If Sam called to confirm every single invoice, that's all that would occur. And there's more that they have to get done because they just deal with a lot of invoices. There's a lot that happens in that company. The scam was discovered only after a phone call was involved, and that came from the bank, not from anyone internal. And then part of the problem, as to number 3, Sam already was afraid of Alex and was afraid to ask about the invoice, anything further than a single email. So this is an interesting dynamic that technology can't really fix. This is a person-to-person problem that was exacerbated by a technology compromise. So if there had been a better relationship between the two people, then, and if Sam was not afraid of Alex from other problems and other issues that had occurred, then perhaps a phone call would have been warranted, or there would have been some back and forth, or something would have been, there would have been more communication between the two parties. But things were already not great. And as you can imagine, it only got worse after this. So that's not something technology can fix. That is a management problem. That was a person problem. And it definitely was made worse. So company number 2, Northwind Traders. Once again, Microsoft companies. Northwind Traders outsources their accounting department to a local accountant. We provide consulting on an as-needed basis. They do have internal IT staff as opposed to Contoso. So for the sake of naming, we will use the following. We've got Jordan, the company owner, Morgan, who is an important manager in the company. Max is the fired IT manager, and Drew is the remaining IT person. So what's important is, actually I'll go into that on the next slide, but the keyword there is fired. Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one. Okay, the setup. So 2 months prior, Max was fired with cause. Some of the reasons that Max was fired it wasn't discovered at the time, but since then, there's been some things that were uncovered that have made that situation even worse for Max. And I'll go into that on a later slide. At the time, almost all passwords in Northwind Traders were changed. Keyword there is almost all, not all, almost all. We went through and we helped them change a number of critical passwords that we knew about, that we had, in our possession. But for the most part, the other IT staff person was the one who, was keeper of the passwords and was changing passwords. We were just providing support as to what needed to be changed. But what's critical is almost all passwords. So not all, but almost all. Northwind Traders has had recommendations for setting up 2FA in the past. They use Office 365, but they've never decided to act on it. There have been 2 other serious compromises in the past. Neither resulted in 2FA. Neither resulted in any other changes besides immediate password changes. None of the previous compromises even resulted in behavior changes on the parts of the staff that caused the compromise. In the past, there had been problems with people clicking on links, with not great virus protections in place, no content filtering, both of which we now have in place. We have content filtering and we have better antivirus solutions. And so you've got people that will haphazardly click on everything that don't have great security and don't have 2-factor authentication. So as a result, they had several serious compromises in the past, but nothing changed. They had Windows Defender. Part of that was because Max had let their antivirus software expire and hadn't renewed it for a period of time. That is partly why the firing was in place. Drew is an email admin and had his account set up. Had that account set up by Max. That's a serious problem, actually. And I think that ended up being the weak link right there. So one day, the accountant gets an invoice from Morgan, who's one of the managers, asking for payment for an invoice of $110,000. This is for a vendor that Northwind Traders has never used before. Morgan has CC'd Jordan and 2 other people that normally would be included on these items. Morgan is authorized, it's important to note, Morgan is authorized to ask for payments this large, but it is a substantial amount given the overall yearly budget. So while the amount from Contoso was a very small amount, and they probably could have paid it and not even noticed, this was a very substantial amount and would have caused serious financial repercussions to Northwind Traders. The accountant had some back and forth, once again, via email only, and receives confirmation from Jordan via email to proceed to pay. However, unsatisfied with this response, the accountant calls Jordan and exposes the scam. We get called. So once again, a phone call is what saves the day because the emails were through compromised accounts. What's also important to notice is that there are multiple compromised accounts in this case. Previously, it was just one. It was just Alex, the company owner. In this case, there are multiple accounts that have been compromised. So our first response is to change everyone's passwords and scan everyone's computer that was on the email chain. They all come up clean. So we put regular stuff on there. We use, extra scans with malware bytes and whatever else that we need to use, and everything comes back clean. So there's nothing that is out of the normal, no Trojans, remote access that we can tell. However, 2 days after all the password changes, Morgan sends another email to the accountant asking where the payment was. At this point, people start freaking out because we've already changed passwords. We've already scanned computers and there is nothing that's coming back. So how did that happen? So that's when I start digging into the logs. And part of it was, in essence, part of the problem in this case was I didn't go straight to the logs. Because they've had multiple compromises in the past, you get to a sense of, let's just change the password, look at a couple of things, make sure everything's clean, because that's what's happened multiple times in the past. That was not what happened here. So we reviewed everything more closely, especially since, I've got other clients, and a 2-day period of time is not a huge amount of time to necessarily deal with everything. But it was definitely, people started freaking out. So we reviewed emails to the logins and discovered the following. In spite of multiple instances of password changes at the organizational level, Drew's password, I don't think was ever changed. And you're talking about the email admin, because there's an email admin. Notice also that there's not a separation of privileges in this case. So the email account that was used for day-to-day was also the admin account. We can make recommendations, but that doesn't mean that they're going to get put into place. So that's already a prime problem, because the account that's being used is also a master admin account, and there's no separation of powers in this case. And you have a password that I'm fairly certain was never changed. Drew's account was remotely accessed by a VPN service at the time the emails were sent to the account. So we can see from the login logs on Office 365 that just before those emails went out, Drew's account was accessed by VPN, or from a VPN connection that was out of New York City. And Drew's account had been given full mailbox permission to Jordan, Morgan, and several other people that were critical to approving invoices. So that is how the attacker got in without having to know the passwords for anyone else. So in this case, if you gain compromise, like if you compromise someone's system and you start changing passwords, people are going to notice, because their passwords are no longer going to work. But in this case, when full mailbox permissions are granted, then you're able to log in and it's seamless. There's no alerts, no notice. Well, there could be alerts, and there could be some changes that occurred, or there could be some alerting, but in this case, you'll see that all the alerting was turned off. All right, on all the accounts, there was an email rule that sent emails to and from that specific group of people to a hidden folder in Outlook. Once again, same behavior as with Contoso. So these, it was just this whole group, and actually the people had started complaining because they weren't getting emails from each other. So that should have been a more important trigger as to investigate what was happening, but they didn't raise the issue to IT because they're just like, oh, such and such person is just being slow to reply to email, rather than, oh, maybe the email platform is compromised. So previously there had been an alert set up whenever a rule was changed in the organization. Very important thing, very helpful thing. One of the key staff members realized that had not worked in several months prior to this incident. So you've got a whole series of rules that were changed on multiple accounts, and no one was alerted because that alert was purposely turned off and no one noticed, and no one was auditing the logs. This was not the first time a major email incident had occurred. We had handled 2 prior compromises. Each time they declined to implement 2FA. They told us they didn't want it because it was going to add too much inconvenience to the staff. Once again, convenience beat out security in these cases. Based on the behavior, the scammer clearly knew the internal workings of Northwind Traders. The email from Morgan to the accountant sounded just like Morgan. Now, granted, you could read the mailbox of the different people and get a sense of how they talk, but you can also tell when someone has had direct interactions with someone else and picked up on their diction and verbiage. All right, so what was the fallout? I discovered that no one had reviewed Max's email account after termination. So it had been sitting there it had been sitting there untouched for about 2 months. Upon reviewing the email, I found cases of embezzlement. Yeah, there's just straight up embezzlement occurring the whole time Max was employed. While also at this time, no charges have been filed on $110,000. Max is basically suspect number 1. He's already, this person is already stealing from the company. Might as well determine that, might as well look to see if Max is stealing in other ways. All right. So we immediately implement 2FA on the organization. On a side note, they are now talking about turning it off because of how inconvenient it is to have 2FA on. Once again, we can only recommend. And if they decide to turn it off and they have another compromise and they pay us to clean it up, well, they pay us to clean it up, and I've just made more money on them, not doing what I've recommended that they do. In this case, it was referred to the police. I've conferred with the police multiple times. I've not had any updates in several months. I wish I had more. Basically, we're helping them determine, which vendors do they need to send subpoenas to find information about these different accounts. We turned the alerting back on. That triggered when rules were changed, and that's been very helpful. We figured out that there had been no review of any of the credit card charges in Northwind Trader at any level. And this is what allowed the embezzlement to occur. So what was happening is equipment was being ordered on the company credit card. Yeah, that's it. The equipment was being ordered, and nothing ever showed up. So that's how embezzlement works. Yeah, there would be a receipt, there'd be a payment, and then there'd be no equipment that ever showed up. And so the reason why this went on for so long was because no one was reviewing the credit card charges and comparing it, essentially to what assets were in play. So when you order a bunch of laptops and no laptops appear, that really should have been caught. When order a bunch of desktops and the desktops appear, you're kind of supposed to notice that. So because there was no oversight on the financial side, it was extremely easy for this behavior to occur. Now, as a result, at least thankfully, multiple parties are now carefully scrutinizing every credit card charge. They're trying to pay as much by check as possible. And we've worked with the police to determine which vendors do they need to subpoena and for other parts of the embezzlement, as well as to that fraud invoice as well. Okay. Triple face palm, because sometimes not even double face palm can explain how much you fail. It kills me that first of all, you got no separation of permissions, especially when you got this many people in play. You've got no one reviewing the logs to know that there were logins from locations other than where they're supposed to be. You've got a admin account where the password wasn't changed even after a setup and after a compromise. You've got people wanting to turn off one of the most effective security mechanics that they have to keep people from getting into their systems. And I just look at them and go, okay, if that's what you want to do, we'll just look forward to the next time you get compromised and you paying us to clean it up again. Some other thoughts. The breakdowns can be summarized in the following ways. No 2FA. It's very easy in spite of past compromises. No password changed on the admin account. Drew was set up as a patsy basically because, all of a sudden Drew has access to everything and he's the one who's logging, Drew. Drew's logging in and making it look like Drew has access to everything. It's just, it was a total setup job. And rule alerting was disabled and no one noticed. I didn't put on their separation of powers, but we know that's there. Okay, so some other thoughts. No review of logs, even with full-time staff, and more importantly, a history of compromise. This should have been happening all along. The scam was discovered once again only after a phone call, and no review of email or effort to recover work laptop after Max was let go for cause. So it's just and no review of credit card charges allowing for other fraud to occur. Okay, so that's just one thing after another. It kills me to see that. So what was in common? So what was one of the biggest things? You don't have a high level of security on what is essentially a critical system resource. So the email allows you to get in and say reset your domain information and reset banking information, and in this case, contact your accountant to authorize payment of invoices. Like, this is all extremely critical systems, and you'd want to secure it better than what they currently have. Oop, too many clicks. No one noticed when rules were changed. That occurred in both locations. You also had phone calls as really the primary method of actually catching on to the malfeasance. And no one was checking logins for abnormalities. Rejection of basic security recommendations after previous compromises. I mean, Contoso also had email compromises, not by Alex, but by other staff in the organization. And once again, very little changed. and technology issue is amplified by other organizational dysfunction. So in that case, you've got a full lack of people checking credit cards. You've got a bad interpersonal relationship between company owner and accounting, such that they don't want to, the accounting doesn't want to question what the company owner is saying, and some other items that it's just amplified. It makes it worse. So do these incidences bother me? I mean, yes, they do. Of course, I hate seeing clients have issues. We're there to help them have as smooth of a time as possible. We want to keep the bad guys out. I hate seeing resources at risk like this, and I hate thinking that we could be doing more. Like, I know that there are things that we could be doing to help them prevent this. That doesn't mean they want to do them, but I do know that we could be doing things. But at the same time, no, it doesn't bother me. They both had recommendations for security, and they both ignored them. And in fact, after implementing them, they almost want to take them back. Both had previous history of compromises, but made no changes. And they're extremely easily avoidable problems. That's what just kills me. These are not hard to avoid. You don't have someone coming in and pointing a gun at your face saying, "Give me all your money." That's a clear present danger. You're going to get shot if something doesn't happen. But this is basically tricking you into sending money for fraudulent invoices. There's a whole bunch of steps. In each case, it wasn't the person showed up and boom, here's the money. There was a number of steps and a number of failures at every point of the way to get to the point where the scam actually occurred. So I hope that wasn't too clickbaity. I'd love to say that Max has gotten caught and is in jail, but once again, it's a police investigation, and those take quite a long time, especially when you're issuing subpoenas to vendors that are, far off and away. I'd love to say more. It's almost, we're getting close to 8 o'clock. So I am always good for questions if anyone has questions on this, Ben.
When I pasted the link where they believe a voice deep fake was used to authorize payments.
Oh, that's going to be the next. Yeah, deep faking is serious issue. Especially since phone calls are what caught the criminals in both cases here. So, question I would have for you guys: have you guys encountered or been party to any compromises or scams like this? I know Ben had mentioned somebody.
Yeah,
we were talking on the phone.
A previous organization that I wasn't. They diverted the direct payment of the compromised account. So getting into the HR and depositing their paycheck in another local account.
That's genius.
Yeah. And then, it was a phishing scam. And once they had one account with an external phish, once they were inside, they converted it and made it look like, internal emails, and got several of the people that way.
Wow. That's pretty efficient. Sorry, I'm gonna stop sharing. Is there anything else in chat?
Are there other questions? We have, let's see. Aaron, have you raised your hand here? Do I need to bring you forward? No, his hand is raised, so I'm going to bring Aaron forward.
So I had kind of a quick oddball question. I figured it'll be a dialogue-ish, so I threw it in this way. So you've got a lot of pushback towards 2FA, and I guess what I was going to wonder is are your clients at a level with 265 they can do conditional access, or are they only in the boat where you're stuck with phone SMS and almost nothing else?
They're all basic accounts, like the lowest tier basic accounts.
Do you know if you get FIDO for that now?
I thought that was extra last time I checked.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just it kills me because we rushed to push it out after, like, on Northwind Traders after the compromise, and we got it installed, and they hate it. You know, the fact that they almost lost $110,000 is less worse than the fact that they have to
That they have to
extra
grab
10 seconds.
customers.
Yep.
Yeah. I was hoping
Which is
you
just-
might be able to do search or something and make it more frictionless.
Brought up like the idea that insurance would have covered it, and so they're not
We've
concerned
also had
about
that. No, because they didn't have good data breach at the time either. And actually, depending on the data breach policy, that might not get you your money back. It just depends on the carriers and what kind of policy you get. Especially since a lot of those policies, because I've helped companies work on their coverage for, like, their security coverage and the security questionnaires for data breach. They would get denied so hard their heads would be spinning because they have just one IT failure after another that they basically would have, if they had filled out a decently normal questionnaire with the answers of what was happening, they would have had to have lied to get the coverage because they have all sorts of questions that address these very issues.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll give you coverage, but you have to turn on MFA.
You have to actually be secure. So, yeah, it's pretty. It's both sad and funny at the same time.
So we have another comment from Daniel. I was called today from the IRS by deep. It was only slightly robotic, but sounded very, very authentic. Was the most impressive robotic voice I have heard. It's an interesting comment. I guess a return comment on the deep fake.
Yeah,
Previous.
that's actually the deep fake is a very worrying trend from a security standpoint, especially since voice is such a big deal for knowing who you are and all that.
Other questions? Other comments? If not, then hey, thank you so much, Jonathan, for taking time out to present to us. And it was a very fascinating topic. And now to the tables. And we can continue the discussion there.
Excellent. Well, thank
you very much.